Welcome to another episode of What Do You Really Think? I'm Buck Sexton, and with me, co-host, the one and only
Marc Lamont Hill.
And this week we are a trio. We are not quite a string quartet. We are a trio, and I guess I'll be on bass because I think bass is cool. Mark is on sax, and Ben, what is your instrument this week? Ben Ferguson.
Dude, I play the drums. People don't know that. I'm a drummer.
Are you really? That does not surprise me at all, actually.
I kid you not. I am a drummer.
I'll take it.
I'm actually a drummer, too. That's actually pretty cool. Me and Ben have so much in common.
I know.
See,
so in case you missed us last week, Ben and Mark go way back to years of battling on CNN, so we thought that he was a perfect person to join us here and continue on with that. And all three of us, as we have noted, are ex-CNN employees, all very happy to be out in the world and doing quite well.
We may be the happiest ex-employees you've ever seen, right?
Yeah, there are so many stories we could all tell about that, but that's for like the green room after hour show. We could sit down and
exactly.
have some drinks and talk about it. But I want, because people are going to be watching this, listening to this over their Memorial Day weekend. Because he's our guest, Mark, I wanted to toss this to Ben first. Then I want to have your response to it. Ben, thus far, we are, let's say, 5 months, give or take, right? We're 5 months into the Biden presidency, and it does feel to me like Mr. Magoo is running the United States government. So I just want to know what you see so far.
Yeah, I see a very confused grandpa that you take to the doctor. That's what I see. This is that moment when your dad's not making sense, and at first you laugh about it, and then the second time when it happens, you call your sister or your brother afterwards. You're like, hey, did you notice Dad tonight? Yeah, I noticed it too. Okay, we need to start watching this, right? And now you're 5 months in, and it's like something's wrong with this dude. He's clearly not running the family business anymore. He's clearly not running the White House. I think other people around him are doing it. He's gaffe after gaffe after gaffe every day. And and part of me genuinely feels sorry for him because he gets up there and he loses his train of thought. And I'm like, is this really the guy running the United States of America right now? Remember the whole 3 a.m. phone call question Hillary Clinton wanted you to think about? This guy can't take a phone call at 3 p.m. Forget 3 a.m., right? I mean, it's just, you wouldn't hire this guy to help you change a tire, but we want him to be in charge of foreign policy, domestic policy, taxes in this country, healthcare in this country. Unfortunately, I genuinely miss Barack Obama, and I thought I'd never say that, but I do.
Listen to that, Mark. We got a concession. He misses Barack.
I do. At least I knew he was in charge.
Barack, you knew that the guy, he was absolutely with it. He was of sound mind the whole time, and he had plenty of energy, and he gave a good speech. Mark,
he was on his A game, always.
So you guys put me in the most uncomfortable position of having to defend Joe Biden.
I love it. It's always fun to watch this.
You know, I'm not a Joe Biden guy, obviously. I voted for him because I felt like the country was on fire and I had no choice.
And Karl Marx was not technically on the ballot.
Not technically. He's not an American citizen and he's dead. But other than that,
yes,
he'd have been my guy. I think that Joe Biden's incompetence is partly about ageism. I think partly about how inartful he communicates. And do I think he's as sharp as he was when he ran for president in 2008 or when he ran in 88? No. Or when he ran in 2000? No. But I think that he's capable of doing the job. I think in my communication with his team, my communication with his aides, and my communication with beat reporters, my sense is that he's just fine. A second term.
Wait, was that a joke or were you being serious when you just said that?
No, I mean, I
was looking at the camera. I was waiting for the laughter. You don't really believe that, do you?
I do. I think mentally he's completely capable of doing the job. I think I have criticisms of the job, but I'm not worried. I don't think that at this stage. I think I compare it. This is the last thing I'll say. I compare it to Reagan first term. Reagan second term was not capable of doing the job. Although I don't find Republicans find that to be an issue, right? Because the policies were passed that they wanted. I think that a second Biden term might be irresponsible. But I think this one at this moment is just
so fine. You're essentially answering the question I was going to pose to you before Ben and I can start jumping in and screaming socialism, which, as some of my conservative friends point out, unfortunately doesn't work as well as we had hoped it would, I think, in this country to win votes. The socialism attack is not as strong as it needs to be. But you're agreeing that at some level, Mark, that there is such a thing as too old to be the leader of the free world, right? I mean, like there is, because I think Nancy Pelosi is almost 80 years old. I think that this is something that you use the term ageism. Is it really ageism, or is there a point at which it's irresponsible, right? I mean, Dick Cheney's heart condition was a huge topic of conversation when he was the vice president for years because, he couldn't really take over because he might have a heart attack. That's what the left was saying. Yeah,
that was nuts. I think that I think the idea that someone can't do the job simply because they're that age is the issue. If I give you an example, if I were choosing a quarterback right now, and you told me just picking names out of a hat that my quarterback would be in his 40s, in his mid 40s, I'd say no, that's not a good age for a quarterback. If you ask me if it turned out to be Tom Brady, sure, right? Tom Brady's capable of doing it, but I'm going to have more skepticism. I'm going to ask serious questions about this 40-year-old until I find out it's Tom freaking Brady. Then I'm like, okay, I know he can do the job. But Joe Blow, no. Similarly, if you tell me my president's in his 70s, I'm going to have a lot of questions. I think that's reasonable. I don't think it's ageist to ask if someone in their late 70s is capable of doing the job.
See,
I think some can and some can't.
Let's go back a week ago. And if you're a sports fan, you love the story of what just happened with Phil Mickelson at the age of 50, winning a major golf tournament, turning back time. He was a 300-to-1 odds guy. If you put down literally $100, you were getting paid about $30,000. It's incredible when you see what he was able to accomplish. My point is, and you notice my first thoughts about Joe Biden has nothing to do with his age. I could give two rats' ass about someone's age. But okay. Joe Biden today is not the Joe Biden of even 2 years ago or 4 years ago. There is clearly something wrong with him cognitively. And if it was your own father, you would take them to the doctor. If it was your grandfather slurring their words and randomly yelling at people and then forgetting what they were saying and then making up facts that just don't exist in the context of conversation that doesn't even make sense in that context on a regular basis in front of a crowd when you have a teleprompter and you're still screwing up and having those long pauses and losing your train of thought while reading the teleprompter, that has nothing to do with age. That has something to do with mental capacity. It's not a slander. It's just the reality. And I think the left has got to figure out a point where they start asking a question, because I don't think he's going to make it 4 years in a responsible manner. Would be. But
I think Kamala just steps in and then they're happy with that, Ben. That's the problem, right? I mean, Kamala. Well, that's why. I hear leftists who are honest who will just say, "Yeah, but that's why we got a vice president, because if he feels like he really can't do the job, he says for health reasons I step down. Kamala's the president. The left is happy. This is the thing. I feel like conservatives are waiting. We're waiting to pounce, because that's all good. We always, every time we have an issue on something, it's conservatives pounce is what the media always says. But it's like we're waiting to pounce on this issue. And this is like I always say, it's like when we point out hypocrisy on the left, we say, haha, you're hypocrites. And the left says, yeah, we get away with it because we have power to do the things we want to do now.
This is exactly what we say about the right.
No, right? Bull crap.
Yeah,
really?
Y'all don't say that about the right. Y'all laugh in our faces and you go, look what we got away with again, and look what's happening to them on the right.
Yeah.
When Merrick Garland was shot down, and people like Lindsey Graham said, and Mitch McConnell said, we're doing this because it's an election year.
Yeah.
And if we don't do it, and if the table, I'm paraphrasing, but if the tables are turned, you can judge us on our decision to act differently. I say, cool. I thought the Merrick Garland thing was terrible. I thought Barack Obama in January of his last year has a right to nominate a president. And if Republicans had said, look,
not president, you mean a Supreme Court justice.
Supreme Court justice.
Don't pull a Joe Biden on us right now. See, this is what worries us. I'm concerned about you, my friend. Maybe we need to go to the doctor.
Mark is working 50 hours a day, though, so we cut him some slack.
It's all work. He's all exhausted.
You got Obamacare. You can handle it. We'll get you to a doctor. Go ahead.
But if then 8 years later or 4 years later they say, it's a month before an election and we are going to nominate one, and now the voters have a right to decide during a presidential campaign thing is different. Republicans, I mean, we can make distinctions and say, oh yeah, but this was different because we had all the branches of power, yada yada yada. But at the core, Republicans said we did it then because we could, and we're doing it now because they couldn't. If you talk to a lot of Republicans in the Senate, they'll acknowledge that it was a power play, and Democrats got outmaneuvered.
But see, that was a power play within the rules and within. I mean, Ben, that was a power play within the rules and what was established procedure already. They just weren't going to give an up or down vote, and they're allowed to do that. I mean, if we're going to talk about power plays in the Senate and Supreme Court justices, or rather just judges. And at the federal level, I mean, it was Harry Reid who decided to use the nuclear option, and everyone said this is going to create a tit for tat, and this is going to be an escalation. And Harry Reid's attitude was, "I'm Harry Reid," and so this is it also turns into a little bit of the gerrymandering discussion, where when people complain about gerrymandering, what they're always complaining about is the other side gerrymandering, because ultimately somebody's got to make these decisions. But see, it's funny. We think, and I used to have this conversation with Crystal Ball all the time, who's a good Democrat and a friend of mine, and I left. I wonder, we got to get her on the show because I wonder if she's further left.
After 2 weeks of Ben Ferguson, I need Crystal Ball. I need Raul Castro. I need. You owe me a few.
I know. I'll track them down.
Send over your socialist list, and we'll democratize them. Right.
This is gonna turn into like Havana TV here on Quake Media. It's gonna be all the communists. But I'll tell you this. I think that from the perspective of trying to figure out where the Biden administration goes from here. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit for a second. Mark. Are you guys, meaning the left, are Democrats of the more AOC school, are you happy with this Biden administration? Because the complaint from our side is that your side has basically a senile leftist who will do whatever the puppeteers around him want him to do. But I feel like your team is like, he's not doing enough.
Okay, so my first thing is, Joe Biden is not a leftist, right? Any more than Donald Trump was a right-wing extremist, right? Donald Trump did fairly ordinary Republican shit.
That is true.
Right?
That is true.
But there's a way that
unless you watch CNN, they would tell you that's not true, but go ahead.
And that's fair, right? But that's my point. But similarly, we're looking at Joe Biden and suddenly he's Bernie Sanders, right? And the guy says, Biden says no to Medicare for all, says no to Green New Deal. Forget about whether we agree with these policies or not. I'm just saying in terms of where he sits on it, right? He says no to defunding police. We just had an awful crisis in Gaza. His position is the standard American line on it. It's not even as progressive as Bernie or Elizabeth Warren's is, right? Or quite frankly, some Republican senators. And so when I look at Joe Biden, the idea that he's some senile leftist just keeps signing off on Cuba-like legislation is simply untrue. I think though that many of us on the left think that Biden has done more than we expected, but he's still far from where we would like him to be. I would have said that Biden was going to govern directly from the center, and that he was going to like a Dallas Mavericks basketball player, fake left and go right, And instead, I think he's still centrist, but he's absolutely slightly left of center, right? Whereas I think he'd be right up the middle. And I think that there are, obviously government spending is something that people are going to say, look how much money he spent. Sure, right? I don't think he's ever denied that. But when you look at where the
I'm not sure he's even acknowledged it, though. I don't think he really even knows how much they're spending on his behalf. He's just like, we got to do it.
But I think there's a way that, the AOC wing of the party would say, of course, spending has to happen to solve these problems that we have. But they would say we need to push him more. And I think the best measure of where Joe Biden is and where I see him is the fact that those of us who are on the real left, the crystal ball left, are saying, were pleasantly surprised, which is a gesture to you, right? That he is more left than some predicted, but he's absolutely not, the far left. I mean, there's so many ways where Joe Biden is just pissing us off because of what he's not doing.
But let me ask you this. Is the Democratic Party, I've been saying this now for the last couple of months, it's very clear that the centrist Democratic Party, to use a term that you just mentioned about, kind of centrist Republicans, and you thought that he was going to go from the center left. I think it's very clear that the center Democratic Party is dead. This is no longer a center Democratic Party. I would argue this is a socialist Democratic Party. And Joe Biden was just the electable figurehead to get you over to the far left.
The Trojan horse. This was always the formulation that we talked about on the right. The Trojan horse presidency. That's what everyone was saying about Biden.
So when Biden gets in and the horse opens up, who comes out? Kamala Harris? Is she the radical lefty?
No. I don't think she's running. I really don't. I don't think that Kamala Harris is driving the ship. I think it actually is the AOCs, the Lama Mars, genuinely who are moving the Democratic Party to the Socialist Democratic Party based on policies. I mean, you and I both know this, Mark. The spending that the Democratic Party is doing right now is unsustainable unless you are deliberately doing it to fundamentally change the United States of America into a socialist country. The only way that you can explain the spending that they're advocating for right now is if you are actually trying to change this nation fundamentally at its core into a socialist nation, because in a free democracy, you cannot spend like this and keep our economy the way that it is right now. It's impossible. So I would argue Democrats are, in fact, implementing socialism, and they're going to do it by bankrupting this nation to the point where we all become one.
If, again, this idea of socialism, I think when we look at how much, and this is another place where Biden and I disagree. Biden believes billionaires should exist. Biden is fine with billionaire wealth. Biden's fine.
Only if it's Hunter
Who
Biden.
else is going to pay him $150,000 a speech, Mark?
Fair point, right?
And who's going to employ his son, Hunter?
Well,
not poor people, not socialists.
Mark is stepping into
Hunter
the right-wing
Biden's got,
Thunderdome here. Now we got Hunter Biden. What about Benghazi, Mark? What about Benghazi?
I'm playing my bingo card here. I got Hunter Biden. I got Benghazi. Hillary's emails is next.
Getting those teeth fixed, and Hunter got fixed, my friend. That costs a lot of money.
No, I guess what I'm getting at. I almost forgot where we were going with that. But the what was I? Oh,
your party's a socialist party, and y'all are trying to bankrupt America.
But Biden very much believes in private capital, private wealth. He's okay with companies like Amazon existing. Biden, I think, obviously is to the left of Trump. He's obviously to the left of your interests, both of your interests. But Biden absolutely is not trying to turn this into a socialist country. Now, I think the ideal circumstance for a lot of Democrats, not me, again, I'm to the left of this, but is that we simply strengthen the social safety nets we already have. And that we deal with many of the federal things that we have to deal with. I'm talking about things like infrastructure, things that we probably all agree we should be paying for, right? Like infrastructure. The extent to which we do, we may disagree on. But I think we'd agree with that. Military, right? Most people, again, not me, but most people would agree that we need to invest in the military for all the reasons that people want to invest in military. But when you, and what I disagree with is the amount, not that there should be a military or not. But when you talk about, again, investing in issues around the climate, when you talk about investing in sustainable housing for people, when you think about education, these are places that, the Biden administration wants to dump more money into, and that many people find fundamentally problematic. I mean, Trump wants to, as did other Republican leaders, presidents wanted to close certain, I was going to call them ministries, but certain, departments, and so, there's a fundamental difference there, but I think it becomes hyperbole when we say that Joe Biden, of all people, based on his track record, based on his history, is attempting to usher in some era of true socialism. I think a social democracy, right? Just what we used to call just Democrats. I think it's something that's reasonable. But anything other than that, I think it's hyperbole.
I don't think he
Ben,
wants to
Ben,
bring
let's let you respond, and then I want to move to another topic while we have some time here. Go ahead.
No, I don't believe that Joe Biden is cognitively there actually saying yes or no to socialism. I think the absence of Joe Biden driving the agenda of his administration is allowing for socialism to be driven by the left, the spending by the left. I don't believe Joe Biden in normal times of Joe Biden's career would ever agree to the government spending that we're seeing right now that will be tied to his name forever. I think he would have stopped it.
You're asking for clarity here. So you think it's like a Weekend at Bernie's kind of thing?
You like Bernie Sanders more? Is that what you just said?
No, we said Weekend at Bernie's, the movie.
I'm kidding. No, I don't think he.
I just grab his hand and he's just signing legislation, Medicare for all.
The fact that every week on my show, the fact that every week on my radio show we actually have a segment dedicated to the new gaffes of the President of the United States of America, knowing that there will be enough for the next week that we are able to keep that segment going without having anything in the future, tells you just how bad it really is. I mean, we literally made the decision, hey, we can do a gaffe for the week because we know there's going to be one where he loses his thoughts, where he slurs his words, where he makes up new words that don't exist. I just think Democrats see it as an opportunity around him.
It turns out, Ben, that you and I, are not going to be able to convince Mark that Biden is a socialist, or it turns out that this week we have not accomplished it. Or that he is Weekend at Bernie's as a president. But there's another issue, and so here we are again looking back, because that's kind of our theme for this week, looking back at where we are, going into this holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And we're looking at 5 months of a Biden presidency so far, but also what we're just seeing nationwide, the most important stories and trends we've had so far. And one area, Ben, where I find I have fascinating, almost weekly conversations with Mark, not so much about masks anymore because I'm just right and Fauci's an idiot, and we just put that aside. But fascinating conversations because Mark is very dedicated to and very eloquent on the notion of police. And I just think, and I say this, and Mark knows, with complete, and actually people say with all due respect, I don't mean it. I actually mean this with respect. I just think that Mark's wrong on this one, really wrong on this one. We have violence worse this year than it even was last year with the spike. 20 plus years, we haven't seen a homicide rate like this one nationwide in the country. It coincides with the defund the police movement. And obviously we're going to give Mark some real time here to respond to all this. But Ben, I feel like we've already run this experiment of let's have Democrats blaming cops a lot and even cutting the budgets a little bit here and there in some cities, depends on the city, for law enforcement specifically. And things get worse and cops don't want to do their jobs and people don't want to get those jobs. And as a result, people die.
Yeah, I grew up in a law enforcement family. My dad still wears a sheriff's department badge. I have told him I want him to stop because there is no value anymore associated with his job or his life. I've also been a victim of a violent gun crime where 2 gang members shot at me at point blank range. I was able to save my life by protecting myself by using a firearm. So I have 2 very different perspectives here on violent crime. But what I do know is happening in this country is, I'll give you an example in my hometown.
Wait, can I hold on a second? Hold on a second, Ben.
Yeah.
Well, would you mind telling us? I mean, that's quite what happened?
No, I was in my hometown in Memphis, Tennessee. It was my best friend and I, we were leaving his house. There was a gang initiation. And what a gang initiation is basically an older gang member, a senior gang member, initiates a younger gang member, and they call it getting blood in the gang, where you kill somebody, cold-blooded murder, and then they know that if you ever want to get out of the gang and or if you ever get busted doing a crime or selling dope or whatever, that you won't wear a wire or narc on other gang members because they know when and where you killed somebody. And so we were their targets, or I was their target, and my best friend happened to be with me. And so anyway, the job was to kill both of us. Cold-blooded murder right there in the street, 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday evening. They didn't know that this white guy was going to pop a cap right back at him, which, was kind of fun. I'm not going to lie that I was able to shock them that way.
Well, no, but how did you, look, I'm curious, and this is a close combat situation. So
bullet casings, their casings to my casings, when they measured the crime scene, they were the closest casings were 5 feet apart. So after they came out of the guns, hit the ground.
So they came out guns blazing, missed you.
So they got out of the car. They came up. They took the slide of the gun and cocked it so that we knew they were chambered bullets. I had my gun behind my back. I was able to raise up as they were getting away, or as after they robbed us. Actually, they never felt my gun on my back. I should tell that part of the story. They beat us up, and they never reached around back. I had my keys and my phone in my wallet, my front 2 pockets. We had actually just left the fair from riding rides. So I had my wallet in my front pocket. They never reached around back. They actually walked away after robbing us. They both smiled at each other when they were about 4 or 5 feet away. They raised up and started unloading, and I raised up with my gun and started shooting back. So my point is...
Did you hit them?
No, I did not. I didn't get hit. My buddy didn't get hit. They hit this window out on the right side of my head. There were shots in between the two of us. And multiple shots in the door panel and the wood pile, and neither of us, by the grace of God, got hit. They did find them. It was weeks later using my cell phone that I never turned off, and one had been to jail for multiple violent gun crimes before, attempted murder charges and rape charges. He got 6.7 years on a plea deal. The other one got 5.7. Both have been out, and both have gone back, one for attempted murder since then. They threatened to kill us at the courthouse. The gang members did when we testified against them for a parole violation. This is that broken cycle of they go in, they get out, they go in, they get out, and threatened to kill us at the courthouse and actually hit the stop button in the elevator after they followed us in and said if we testified against them, they would murder us and our families. It was pretty intense, to say the least. But I say that to talk about...
I did think that our audience should, and I'm glad they did hear that
context.
So, yes, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so I have a very different perspective, I think, on violent crime in America today. But I've told my dad I don't want him doing this anymore because no one values his life anymore. And I think it's time for him to hang it up and just flat out retire. I have 3 boys. I would not tell any of them to become police officers right now because it's open season on police officers. But I also think there's a real problem in this country. In my hometown of Memphis, a 1-year-old was murdered yesterday, sitting in the car at the grocery store, at the Super Low, and was shot and killed. Rushed to the hospital, died before they get her to the hospital. There are more children in my hometown of Memphis that have been murdered this year than all of last year combined. There are more African Americans have been murdered this year than any other year in history in Memphis. In history, including when you had civil rights unrest when Martin Luther King was murdered in Memphis, Tennessee. And the problem is you have a city council that has defunded the police. They have said they want to abolish the police. You have a county commission that has also said they want to abolish the police, and they have defunded the police. We are 900 police officers down right now. Ironically, I think it was 93% of all the people that were murdered last year in Memphis were African American. And over 96% of the people that were caught killing them, of those that were caught, were African American. My question is, where's Black Lives Matter as a movement? Why is Black Lives Matter in my hometown has never once marched after the death or the murder of a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old? Now, they will shut down the famous M Bridge that so many people know in Memphis. If you ever watch the Grizzlies, you'll see the beautiful M Bridge. They shut down traffic on that bridge for Black Lives Matter movement, but they've never shut down traffic after a child has been murdered in our city. And that is the problem that I have right now with this defund the police, hate the police, F the police. The chance of death to America. What do we want? Dead cops when we want them now. Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon that was shed in New York by Black Lives Matter. These are the things that have happened. We've dehumanized police officers. And the majority of the force in my hometown of Memphis is African American. 900 police officers down because they are quitting. African American men and women are walking in saying, I'm not going to die for this job when no one wants me here. The mayor doesn't want me here. The county commissioner doesn't want me here. And we have a DA that wants to put people that wear badges in jails for political reasons, and they're saying they're out. And it's sad because who's actually dying is African Americans. The 1-year-old was an African American child. Not a single church, not a single pastor, not a single group of African American men or women marched on behalf of that child. And it happens every day. And I've said, where is Black Lives Matter? If Black lives really matter, why are you not protesting these heinous deaths in this country? But look, you get 900 cops down and you hate police, they keep quitting. And when you say we're not going to fund them, you have anarchy. And the people that are suffering the most, whether it's Chicago, Baltimore, Memphis, New Orleans, Detroit, Philadelphia, are African-American families and children who are being murdered. And that's the part about this protest I don't get. The anti-police or the Black Lives Matter movement, they're not standing up for these kids when they get murdered.
Mark, got to give you the floor.
Yeah. So you said a lot of stuff. So I'm going to try and unpack it as quickly as possible. One, I'll start with the end and back into defunding. Black Lives Matter is a movement, an organization that started after the death of Trayvon Martin and really sort of hit its stride after the killing of Michael Brown in 2014. The point of the Black Lives Matter movement was initially to respond to the death of Black people at the hands of the state and by sort of self-deputized people like a George Zimmerman, right? It's a movement that has expanded to talk about other forms of sort of state violence, not just police, but also issues related to poverty, issues related to at the global level, war, etc., or imperialism is probably more accurate. Black Lives Matter is not an organization or a movement designed to deal with sort of Black on Black violence, as you'd call it. It doesn't mean that Black Lives Matter doesn't care about that issue. It's simply not the focus. I think it's unfair to target them for not marching for an issue that they don't deal with. It would be like saying that, cancer marches don't care about AIDS. It would be like me saying, or even more, or maybe a more direct comparison would be like saying, if they're a group of pro-lifers, it's a pro-life organization. I say, well, if you care about life so much, why aren't you dealing with, and I name a bunch of issues that affect human life that's not about abortion. It's like, that's not what they're designed for. So I think it's an unfair critique of them. That said, there are numerous marches in communities around Black on Black violence. And Black Lives Matter, and I've been pretty close to the BLM movement here in Philly in terms of seeing what they do. The corporate media only captures the big rallies. They only capture the marches in the streets after a high-profile murder. But for the last 8 years, BLM has been meeting about community gardens, food insecurity, trying to resolve food insecurity, education, and other issues. It's not just big marches. It's local meetings. It's organizing. It's getting votes together. It's trying to push public policy forward. And too often the media doesn't capture that. They only wait until there are people in the streets marching. BLM doesn't hate police officers.
That's where I disagree with you. Why would you chant? Hold on, but you can't say that, Mark, and then have the group chanting pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now? Black Lives Matter says that at the big rallies. You can't tell me they don't not like police officers. They hate police officers. They want to kill police officers.
Okay, so when you say Black Lives Matter, I'm not sure, because we're at a point now where anytime Black people organize, people say, well, that's Black Lives Matter.
They're holding a Black Lives Matter banner at the front of their march in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they're chanting, pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. They're doing it on the bridge in Brooklyn, on the Brooklyn Bridge, and they're chanting, what do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now?
I hear your point. I fully hear your point, but let me respond.
Go ahead.
What I'm saying is, if Black people march and there's a BLM march, and I saw this. I've been on the ground at these marches. First of all, the pigs in a blanket one is a really good example where it was like 10 people. If you saw the footage, you realize.
Well, the video would show more than 10. I played it on my TV show at the time. It was more than 10, Mark. It was.
Okay, I was being a bit hyperbolic by saying 10. What I'm saying is that wasn't the official chant of a march, right? When you're at a march and there's 10,000 people there, yes, you will get people from, and a lot of times those people weren't even BLM. In fact, none of them were BLM people in those two cases.
They were wearing BLM T-shirts when they were chanting it on TV. I can't let you rewrite that history. I'm
not trying to rewrite it. I'm just saying, allow me to finish the thought, and then if you disagree, push back. What I'm saying is that, and again, I was at least 2 of these rallies, including the one in Brooklyn. right? Because if you saw the footage, you also know that the people who made that chant were stopped by the march organizers and by other people there. We can't rewrite that either, right? To suggest that BLM, to say BLM had a march where they were marching for this. That wasn't the purpose of the march. That wasn't what the press release said. That wasn't what the organizers said. They all denounced that. The organizers of the march said that. But yes, you can't control who shows up to your march. This is the same thing that happens at a Trump rally, right? That we would criticize, right? If I were to go to a Trump rally, I could find a whole bunch of racist people saying racist shit, right? And not just 10, right? I could find a bunch. But I wouldn't say that was the purpose of the Trump rally. I wouldn't say that Trump organized it. And I wouldn't say that the Trump campaign is racist because of the people.
Can I ask a question, Mark?
Yeah.
Not to, because I know Ben went through a lot of things, but I am curious. Do you worry, Mark, as somebody who, and we speak about this issue week in and week out, you don't, obviously you abhor the violence that is increasing in cities. That's just a matter of fact and data. We agree on that. Do you worry that there is, even if it is not central to the movement, that there is too much, to Ben's point, and obviously I think this is a concern that I have, or my contention. Are you concerned that there is an anti-cop animus that is too present in too much of BLM, even if it's not official or central to the ethos?
I think that it's an interesting question. I don't want to say whether it's too much or not, because that becomes a normative question about what we value. But if you mean too much in the sense of, does it override the mission or the project?
Is it unhelpful? Maybe.
I would say no, it's not. I would say it's not. Now we can have disagreements about whether it's right or wrong, but at the level of its utility, I would say no, it's not. And that brings me to actually the big point, which is about defunding and what defunding is doing. Those of us, and I'm an abolitionist, I support defunding on the way to ultimately abolishing police and prisons. The goal for me is not to do harm to police. I don't want harm to happen to anybody. And I dislike policing. It's not about police, both individuals or collectives. It's about policing as an idea. And there's a way that everybody in America can say, I value education. I love education. Our system sucks. We need to change the whole education system because it sucks. Even though their mom's a teacher, even though their friend's a teacher, even though their neighbor's a teacher, even though they got, there's a way that we can separate individuals from systems. But when it comes to policing, oftentimes it becomes a conversation that often gets so convoluted that you're left to either love the police or hate the police. And there's no space to critique the system of policing, of whether it's working or not. Defunding the police doesn't mean you have a police force filled with officers who are doing their jobs and now they just don't have money to do their jobs anymore. That's not what defunding is. That's how defunding is represented oftentimes in the media. And that's often how people who don't understand defunding talk about it. But as someone who's been working on abolition work for over 15 years now, long before it was it's only become popular in the last year. The purpose of defunding is to take things off of the police officer's plate, right? The purpose of defunding is to say, police officers are doing 10 jobs right now instead of the one that they should be doing. Let's take some of the money out of the police budget and put it into the institutions that would allow police to do their jobs better. I'll give you one quick example. And I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. Well, I was in Indianapolis about a month ago, and I sat down and had a roundtable conversation with officers in Indianapolis. And one of the things they talked about was that this woman, a white woman police officer, said to me, she said, every month I go to this woman's house and she's having a breakdown and she's a threat to herself and she's a threat to others. And part of why she's a threat to herself and a threat to others is because she doesn't take her meds. Why doesn't she take her meds? Because she doesn't have the money to take her meds. So we have to get her to the hospital, to a psych ward where she gets the meds for free once we detain her. And then she gets enough meds to be okay. Then she goes back home and over the 3 or 4 weeks, it wears off because she's going 3 or 4 weeks without the meds. And then we do it all over again. And every time we come, our lives are endangered. The medic doesn't want to come alone because she'll do harm to the medic. We're the first ones on the scene because we're on the beat and the medic's not. And so ultimately, what does that mean? It means that this woman is in a bad situation. Mental health is driving the crime, the quote unquote crime. And we have a police response to a medical problem that is structural. She needs meds and she needs to live in a country where she doesn't have, where being poor means you can't have solid health. The police don't need to be responding to this call. There needs to be an institution or some kind of mechanism so that this woman doesn't need to be called, have the police called on her. All of this is the problem. Defunding says, let's take some of the money out of a police budget so that that officer doesn't have to show up there. That officer can focus on some other shit while a trained medical professional can do this. And let's invest in mental health so that this woman doesn't get to the point where the police need to be called on her.
This is where you and I could agree on a compromise. I'm in favor of funding what you're talking about. I don't think it has to be an either or. I don't think you have to take away funding from the police to provide for what you're saying that we need. And maybe it's time for the Marc Lamont Hill to go on tour to Baltimore and to go to Memphis and to go to New Orleans and go to Detroit and explain to them what you just explained to us, because what they are doing, and I'm witnessing it and living it, is not what you're saying. They're saying police are evil, that police need to be disbanded, that they do not want to ever see a police officer again, that they do not trust the police, that police have no place in society. They have dehumanized the police.
I agree with those.
And so, right, but well, and if you do, we can debate that in a moment. But my point is, this is what's going to happen, and this is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. People that have the means to leave and live in safe cities are going to do that. They're not going to put their families' lives, regardless of race, it has nothing to do with race. It's called logic. And if you live in a city where violent crime is skyrocketing, Memphis is the second most dangerous city in America. We're only behind Chicago. Deaths per capita per thousand, we're number 2 in the country, and by like less than 0.1%. People are leaving in droves. And then you have higher crime and higher poverty, and you have fewer jobs and fewer manufacturing jobs, fewer high-paying jobs. So you have a city that is being destroyed from within because of the arrogance and the ignorance of these extreme BLM activists that have made their way onto the city council, the county commission, and into the mayor's office, who have run off this idea that you should not trust the police, which are predominantly African-American in my city. And they have dehumanized police officers to make people look at them and give them a middle finger when they see them in public. What you're going to do is you're going to ruin these cities. And people that have the means to leave are going to get the hell out because they don't want to die. They don't want their families to be attacked. They don't want their cars to be stolen. They don't want their grandmothers to be beat in the parking lot. And they don't want their 1-year-old child to be killed in the supermarket parking lot on a Sunday. And so you can box this up any way that the left wants to do it. And you can say, oh, we're really talking about taking money here and giving it towards drugs for mental health with this lady here. The reality is, when you're 900 police officers down from adequate police protection, the criminals will run your city and they will kill, rape, and pillage. And that's what they're doing in American cities today.
Yeah, but Ben, I'm not. If you have a system that's designed to be sustained through policing, and then you just take the police out, right? Or you cut them in half, the force in half, then yeah, you're going to have problems. That's not what defunding has ever been about. It's never been.
I would argue the majority of people advocating for it, Mark, are advocating for exactly that.
Yeah, I would urge you to listen.
Only because I've had these conversations with them. I'm not trying to put words in their mouth. I've said to them, I don't understand why you hate the police so much. Well, they're all corrupt. They're all evil.
That's a different conversation. I'm talking about people who actually, at the policy level, are advocating for defunding. Abolition and defunding is not about what we don't want. It's also an affirmative vision of what we do want. We defund all the time. When people say, and people on the right say this all the time, schools are broken. We're throwing good money after bad. Let's take this money out of public schools and let's give vouchers to parents. Right, school choice. Let's create.
But that's more about accountability of increasing funding.
Let me finish the thought. What I'm saying is, when you do that, you're actually defunding public education, but you're putting the money elsewhere. But when Republicans frame it, they don't say we're defunding public education. They're saying we're investing in other things. But when it comes to policing, we focus on what we're taking the money out of and not on what we're putting it into. If you went on a campaign, Ben or Buck or anybody, and said, defund the schools, defund public schools, you'd look like assholes, right? But if you said let's invest, but you frame it as school choice, right? You're saying, okay, you're talking about what you want. So what I'm saying is defunding the police is not about it's not saying let's leave these helpless officers without weapons and guns and body armor. It's saying let's change the system so that police are no longer needed. That's the point. Defunding the police and abolition long term for me.
Okay, let me ask you one question.
Wait, hold on, guys. Ben, we're pretty much at time.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So because we could go on for a very long. Ben, we'll have to have you back. Although we got to do the quad. We got to get like Crystal Ball, or we got to do a tag team situation here, because otherwise, because we're not CNN, so we're gonna do. It's just the problem is that when you have three people. Equal time, if two of them are on one side and one's on the other, it just means that the whole thing is unequal. So we got to get we got to get a quad here, or I'll just sit here and you and Crystal, who is just a great gal, can sit here and just give me a hard time for the next episode, because Mark has been a great sport these last couple of times. But everybody, you see what Ben Ferguson has in the tank. You can check out the Ben Ferguson podcast. Listen to him; he's putting it out all the time. And Ben, we really appreciate you joining us, man. Mark speaks
enjoyed it, guys.
Very highly of you, always have. After this episode, I don't know, maybe he won't as much, but he really likes you, and that speaks very well. I will say it speaks. I've always said this. I've said this in other episodes. It speaks very well to both of you. When people in this business on the other side of the aisle, can have friendships and respect each other. And that's kind of the ethos of the show. So that's why I want to let you guys do your thing. I would let you guys actually. Hug it out right now, but unfortunately we're virtual, so we can't actually do that.
In person.
There you go.
In person. Ben, I owe Mark a sushi dinner, and I'm just going to say this, if we can coordinate it, I'll take you too. Although you strike me as like a California roll guy. You're probably like a Philadelphia
fried,
roll.
I'll eat it. If it's raw, I'm not going there.
I don't know what kind of sushi they have I don't know what kind of sushi they have in Memphis.
I'm going hibachi, and you guys can eat raw fish.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Well, Ben Ferguson, everybody, thanks so much. Everyone, please subscribe to What Do You Really Think by going to quakemedia.com/Buck or quakemedia.com/Mark. If you're checking us out on YouTube, we do this every week. The best left-right conversation you will see anywhere. Gentlemen, have a great holiday weekend, and we'll talk to you both soon.
See you guys.
Peace, everybody.